Hi everyone, Tom here from Front End Beginners, and in this video we'll take a look at how to create a sticky footer using CSS Grid. To set things up, let's create 3 sections within the body tags of our HTML document. The first section will be a header element. The second section will be a main element. And the third section will be a footer element. We'll add some dummy content inside these elements just for the sake of this example. Inside the header tags, we'll add an h1 and just say this is the header. Inside the main tags, we'll add a paragraph and say this is the main content area. And inside the footer, we'll put another paragraph. This is the footer. With those 3 sections in place, we can now move on to the CSS. I've got some font rules set up here on the body element. I'm using Open Sans from Google Fonts, and I've just text aligned to center just for some basic styling. I'm also going to apply some basic styling to our 3 sections just so that we can see things more clearly when previewing the page in the browser. For the header, we'll use a background color of light grey, and we'll give it some padding of 1 rem on each side. For the main, let's give it some padding of 1 rem, and for the footer let's also give it a background color of light grey and 1 rem of padding. So we're trying to create a sticky footer and we want to do it using CSS Grid. The first place to start then is to set up our grid rules. If we look at our HTML, inside our body tags, we've got 3 elements. We want the header to be at the top of the page, the footer to be stuck to the bottom of the page, and the main content area to take up the rest of the available space. These 3 elements, the header, main, and footer, will be our grid rows, and the body element will be our grid container. In our CSS, if we target the body element, let's set its display to grid, making it our grid container. As we want 3 rows, we'll now use the grid template rows property, and this is where we define how many rows we want and how much space we want them to take up. For our first row, the header, we'll give it a value of auto. This means that the row will match the height of the header element and its content. For our second row, the main content area, we'll give it a value of 1 FR. This is a fraction unit, which simply means however much space is left over inside the parent grid container after fitting in the other rows, give that main content area 1 piece or 1 fraction of the available space. And for our third row, the footer area, we'll also use a value of auto. This row will then also match the height of the footer element and its content. So, we've now defined 3 rows. The header and footer are both set to auto, so their size is based upon the height of their content. The main content row is set to 1 FR. Whatever space is left over inside our parent grid container, the body element, after sizing the other 2 rows, will be given to the middle row. Having done this, let's have a quick look in the browser. As you can see, our footer is not stuck to the bottom of the window. Our 3 rows have been defined, header, main content, and footer, but they're still pressed up against the top of the page. This is because our body element, the parent grid container, doesn't have a set height. Currently, its height is effectively set to auto, which means it's only as tall as the content it contains. In order to push the footer down to the bottom of the page and make it sticky, we need to set a min height value on our body container. Min height of 100 VH. VH stands for viewport height units, which basically means we want to set the body container to have always at least a minimum height of 100% of the available viewport height, 100 VH. With this set, no matter how little content our page has, the body element will always have a height at least as tall as the viewport or browser window. The screen space left over after sizing the header and footer rows with auto will now be given to our main content area with the value of 1 FR. If we preview this in the browser now, we'll see that the footer has been pushed to the bottom of the page and is now sticky, even with only one line of text in the main content area. If we take a look at our page with the Chrome developer tools, we can see a bit more clearly what's going on here. Right click on the page and select Inspect to open the DevTools. Make sure you're in the Elements tab and then click on the opening body tag. If you scroll to the bottom of the Styles window, you'll see that my body element has a height of 1007 pixels. This is 100% of the available height inside my browser window, or 100 VH, viewport height units. If we go back to our CSS and remove this min height value, we'll see that the body element now has a much smaller height. In this case, it's just 183 pixels. This is because we haven't set it to 100 VH and it's just automatically sizing itself to match the height of the content it contains, which is the header, main content and footer, and that in this case equals 183 pixels. This is why we need to set the min height value to 100 VH. Even if you have no content inside your main content area, the outer container, the body element in this case, will always be at least the height of the browser window, and your footer will be pushed to the bottom of the page. So, one final thing. What happens if we add more content to the main content area? Let's copy our paragraph and paste it in another 10 or so times. And then go into our CSS and give each paragraph element inside the main element a large padding value of 4 rem, just to space things out a bit. We can now see that the header remains at the top, the content now overflows the viewport, and the footer remains at the bottom of the page. Usually you won't want your footer element to be permanently sticky, so this is the kind of behavior you'd expect. If you did want your footer to remain fixed to the bottom of the screen, even if the content was overflowing it, you'd need to give it a CSS position property. So on the footer here, give it a position property of fixed and set its bottom value to 0. Note here that we'll also need to give it a width of 100% because it's now no longer part of the normal document flow. So our footer now will be fixed to the bottom even if the content overflows it. In this case, it wouldn't matter whether you were using CSS Grid or not, as the footer would simply stick to the bottom of the screen. It's more common to do this with the header than the footer, however. The method I've shown here using CSS Grid ensures that your footer remains at the bottom of your screen, even if you have very little content in your main content area. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer as soon as possible. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.